Hi, Sophie here, and welcome to episode 315 of the Snack Covenant. This is a special edited version of our Patreon exclusive series, What, Where, Why, Enemies of Elden Ring, which frankly isn't that exclusive because every time one of them's actually good, we put it on YouTube instead. That said, if you'd like to hear a much worse unedited version of this very episode, you can check it out on patreon.com/SinclairLaw, and also if you'd like to hear episodes about things that frankly we don't think are important enough to give away for free. Like, remember Marika's bedchamber? What if there was an episode that was just on Marika's bed? Probably thinking that's pointless. It was, but we did it. We hope you enjoy What, Where, Why, Enemies of Elden Ring, Episode 5, Wormface. A very special episode because it's actually about an enemy of Elden Ring instead of an inanimate object.
What is their name?
Wormface. This will also include Lesser Wormface.
What does their name tell us about them?
Well, Sin, you'll never guess. Their faces are in fact full of worms.
Let me ask you, are the worms part of their face? Have the worms latched onto their face? Have the worms been surgically attached to their face? What is the worm situation?
Okay, so this is interesting because most of the worm faces you see, they have a hood on. So it's kind of hard to tell what the exact relationship is. But there's a few that are like, of the lesser ones that are like roughly at your head height. And you can actually see that, like, okay, it does look as though the worms aren't part of their faces. It looks like the worms have burrowed into them. And you can also see, like, when they start, they have a bunch of attacks, like they'll vomit. And when they vomit, the worms will come out. Like, you'll get little worms falling out as they're doing the vomit. So I'm fairly sure that, like, the worms came later. Like, it's a result of the things sort of rotting that these worms are infesting them.
So the body is rotten and it developed the worms?
Yeah, because they're like, when you see them, they're like coughing and stuff. Like, they look diseased.
So could you please describe their appearance other than the worms?
Okay, other than, yeah, I feel like the worms sort of like...
Overtake everything else.
Yeah, but you know, there's other stuff going on. So the worm faces are humanoid. Their proportions are a little like they have kind of quite short, withered legs. They have quite large torsos and long arms. And they also have a very long neck. And basically, where the face would be if this was a person, like there's a lot of people in Elden Ring that have extremely long necks. It sort of follows that kind of anatomy. And roughly where the face would be is just a whole lot of holes that these worms are like sort of like stuck in. On a macro level, there's very big ones and small ones, but then they also have a variety of different outfits. Some of them are completely naked. Some of them are almost naked, but they have this like golden wrap around them. It sort of looks like they like a mummy, like they've wrapped this sort of like golden like cloth around them with all these sort of like amulets stuck to it. And then some go a little further on from that, and not only are they wrapped like that, but they have like a shawl on. And the shawl sort of like goes over their face and it's a golden shawl, so it's like part of the same outfit. And yeah, some of them have little sticks.
Late at night, I think of you, your vision floods my mind.
It looks like they have a worm face underneath the worm faces.
They have like a big mouth under it. The larger ones will attempt to eat you. And what happens is like they'll pick you up and their mouth will open and it's like it doesn't look like a human mouth at all. It looks like a mouth of like a worm or something. Just like this sort of, it doesn't appear to have a jaw. It's like this orifice sort of opens up. And within their mouth, again, like there's piles and piles of worms. The worms are sort of like falling out. That's also like the means by which they do their like death vomit attack. And whenever they open their mouth and do an attack like that, all these other little worms fall out.
So when I look at them, I'm getting this idea that they're a mix of the Snake Man from Dark Souls, they're a mix of the Cthulhu guys from Bloodborne, as well as the little guy that eats you in the dungeon. I forget his name.
The Hole Digger.
Yeah, the hole digger. Yeah. I'm getting a feel like it's a mix of different enemies from Soulsborne games. Do you get that?
It looks like the statues in Yahagul, to the
That
point
too,
where
yeah,
I'm
actually.
reasonably certain that, like, this was probably designed for Yahagul at some point, and they've repurposed it like they have with a lot of the enemies in Elden Ring.
Because worms or parasites or whatever coming out of
Yeah,
people's
yeah.
faces is very Bloodborne.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, other than that, like they have like 5 fingers on their hands. They look relatively humanoid. Their skin might be made of wood because you find them clustered around an area called the Woodfolk Ruins. And like it's not 100% clear if they're people that have started to become trees, because we know that's a thing with Erdtree Guardians. Like they will start to grow branches and flowers out of their backs, or they're some spontaneously created wooden creature. I'm gonna say it's the latter. We'll come to why later on. So I think these were actually like spawned from the Erdtree. I don't think they were ever like human.
All right, so actually, let's talk about this now since we're in the
Okay.
what.
Okay.
You're saying they were spawned from the Erdtree and that they
That's
were
what I'm
never
assuming, yeah.
human.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that?
Right. So the first thing to keep in mind is that there is one like named Wormface that is called Wormface. So like one specific one is one of the huge ones. When you run up to it, you actually get the little bar down the bottom that says Wormface. And it is by the minor Erdtree in the Altus Plateau. So when you think about minor Erdtrees, they spawn guardians. Most of the guardians are the Erdtree avatars, the thing that's just the stray demon with a wood texture and no head. It's that thing. When you defeat those, they drop crystal tears. So the idea is like this thing you're looking at, it's like an avatar slash manifestation of the tree. So when you defeat it, you get like the tears of the Erdtree that are from that tree, right? So there's 2 other places that you get these crystal tears from bosses, right? One is in Mount Gelmir, where they burned down the minor Erdtree. So when it spawns a guardian, instead of spawning the Erdtree avatar, it spawns the ulcerated tree spirits. An ulcerated tree spirit is like the spirit of an Erdtree, but it's gone wrong somehow. So instead of taking the form of like the sort of stalwart tree stump thing, it's this weird snake monster. Most of the time they drop golden seeds, but the one in Gelmir drops crystal tears as though it were an Erdtree avatar. Because that messed up, burned down, poisoned Erdtree, it's spawning that instead of an Erdtree avatar. It's like something went wrong with the Erdtree, so you don't get the avatar, you get the snake. Hey, my name is Trisha. I'm a fragrance consultant, and I've been asked to talk about crystals. So, a long time ago, I'm in Celia with my friend and our other friend who we don't talk to anymore, and there's this lady there, and I think she's Scottish, and she seems like super stressed out. So we talk to her, and we're like, what's up? And she's like, I seek the primordial crystal. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety from you. The best crystal to deal with that is rose quartz. So I'm trying to convince her to just like get one on Etsy, but she says no, she has to have the one that's in the cave. And I say, okay, well, why don't you go and get it? And she says, because the crystals in the cave have something called scarlet rot in them. And I'm like, okay, I see what's happened. Crystals absorb vibes. And if you go in there with that bad attitude, you're gonna make it worse. So, leave your bad vibes at home, come back again later, and try using sage. Anyway, then this guy in really ugly pants showed up and she said she had to leave. I think it was her ex. She was weird.
So, do you think this has something to do with Godwyn and his death and the fact that he's like all messed up?
I certainly do. Because, like I was saying, the named Wormface is by one of these minor Erdtrees, and it's dropping crystal tears as though it's an Erdtree avatar. The precedent is set in Gelmir that if you fuck up an Erdtree, instead of making an avatar, you get something else. So this is like what's happened here. So instead of like poisoning and burning the Erdtree, it's absorbed like all of the Godwyn goop. And it's become like a sort of dying, death-blighted Erdtree, so it spawned the Wormface. And because there's a ton of little worm faces, we can kind of assume, okay, they probably came from it as well. Also worth pointing out that, like, when you beat worm faces, they sometimes drop a thing called a sacrificial twig. That is an item. Basically, it just lets you avoid rune loss after death. But the point is, sacrificial twigs. It says specifically they come from the Erdtree. So these monsters, these wooden things, are also dropping like parts of the Erdtree. They also drop gold-tinged excrement, which is like, it's gross, but it's also like, oh, okay, like they probably had like quite a good concentration of like the golden energy in them then. But yeah. So I'm saying that like they're spawned from the Erdtree because of that. The other reason I'm going to say they're spawned from the Erdtree is that you also find them in Farum Azula. And you find them in Farum Azula in an area of Farum Azula that you get to by following, again, a bunch of like death-blighted stuff. So they're not just like wandering around in Farum Azula. Farum Azula does have ground. Like, this is confusing because you can run through Farum Azula and miss about half of it. So people might not actually know what I'm talking about, but basically there is a lower section of Farum Azula that is essentially like just the ground. Like, it has foliage and it has like rivers and lakes and things. It just straight up looks like this was the ground around Farum Azula and the whole thing got lifted up into the sky and there's still just little bits of like the land clinging to it. There are worm faces down there, and they're a place you reach by following like a trail of deathblight. Now, Farum Azula is not somewhere you can just like kind of go. Like, obviously Marika went there and Godwyn went there, and you know, like Bernal eventually follows us there. But it's not somewhere it's particularly easy to get to. And there's still the worm faces there. And they're basically just like in their own little community away from everything else. And where they are is like, it's kind of at the bottom near, like, you can sort of imagine Erdtree pollen is kind of getting there, or however like the Erdtree is reproducing, because there is evidence of Erdtree stuff in Farum Azula. Like, there are a couple of the little golden trees growing, and like you get a very good look at the Erdtree from Farum Azula. So, and like we know for a fact, like the Erdtree does reproduce with these like flowers and seeds and things that are just carried by the winds. So I am going to assume again that like these are kind of avatars of Godwyn's relationship to the Erdtree, and they're spawning from wherever that like the blighted wood of the Erdtree is. Also, like notably, we've talked a bit before about like Godwyn is buried directly under the capital. The Altus Plateau Minor Erdtree with the Wormfaces, like it's kind of like, it's obviously not the capital because it's like a different place, but it's still like reasonably close to that. And it's also it's in like a low part of the ground. Like it's quite low down. It's in like a sort of valley area. So you can imagine, okay, this is actually like, it's kind of closer to Godwyn because like Godwyn's physically underground. So maybe the deeper you go, the more sort of blighted it's becoming. And yeah, just the fact that like they are wrapped in gold. They're covered in these like golden wraps and golden amulets and golden shawls. Like all of that says like this is to do with the Golden Order and the Erdtree. There's basically 3 things they will do if they don't think you're there. First thing is they will cough constantly. So to me, again, that says like this is not a natural state for them. Like something has gone wrong. They're just perpetually sick and ill. And again, makes sense. Like they're full of these worms. They're full of these parasites that are in their bodies because they're afflicted with this horrible disease. Second thing they will do is they will, in groups of 3, wander around. They have these little staff things, and it's almost like they're performing a ritual, which again suggests like these things were like, these are probably like what they're calling the wood folk. Like at some point there were just these like people made from the trees, people who came from the wood who were like born of the Erdtree, and they lived in this little place. And they still have these like rituals. Like there's like Erdtree incantations and things in that area. There's like a shield that depicts the Erdtree as well. So it's like they were like priests or something who worshipped the Erdtree, like little tiny versions of the Erdtree avatars that were down there. And so they will get in these groups of 3 and they'll just wander around in a circle, almost like it's like a ritualistic thing, with their little sticks, like they're performing like some sort of cleansing thing. And the other thing they will do is, this is mostly the ones in Farum Azula, is they will pray. So they'll get down on their knees and their hands and they'll bow. And the ones in Farum Azula, like the way that they're arranged, like it's clearly like it's a formal thing for them. So everything about, and like again, they're not near the Erdtree. So it's almost like they are bowing to, like, they can't get to the Erdtree, so we have to bow to it because we can't physically reach it.
Well, now they're reminding me of Old Yarnum.
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah, so like there's something about them that's like they're very tied to the Erdtree. And I'm pretty sure they are just like little mini Erdtree avatars that have been corrupted with all of the Godwyn goop.
Oh, poor guys. That's sad.
Yeah.
Well, in this episode, we actually managed to cover the where and why.
Wow.
Do you have anything else to add?
Okay, well we can do where. So where they're in Altus Plateau and they're in Faramazula. There's also one in Gelmir, interestingly. And we talked again about like, okay, well it's a corrupted Erdtree thing. That's where they're corrupting the Erdtree. So again, it makes sense. Probably that one possibly just popped into being.
It's like you pop into being and you're a warm face. That's so sad.
I mean, your choices are Wormface, a stray demon but made out of bark, or a snake that's covered in ulcers.
Or worse, America.
Ooh.
That was a good one, yes, Sophie?
That's good. Yeah.
Thank you.